Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Lily,
Hi, I'm Oliver.
and this is Science in Easy English.
Is your phone shrinking your brain?
It is the modern nightmare, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, we hold these devices in our hands all day. You're probably listening to this deep dive on one right now. And there's this creeping suspicion, this fear that it's doing something terrible to our hardware upstairs.
Right, usually a fear we have while staring at a blue light at 2 in the morning.
Exactly. And if you look at the culture right now, the verdict seems to be in. We have to start with the vocabulary we're using for this. Because in 2024, the Oxford Word of the Year was literally brain rot.
It was. And usage of that specific term jumped by 230% in just a single year, between 2023 and 2024.
Which is such a visceral, gross image. Brain rot.
It paints a picture, yeah.
It doesn't sound like a scientific diagnosis. It sounds like something you'd find in a neglected refrigerator. It makes you picture your gray matter turning into this gray mush because you watched too many 15-second videos of cats falling off tables.
It is vivid, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But in the scientific community, we don't tend to use the word rot. We have a slightly more clinical, though honestly perhaps equally terrifying term for this phenomenon. We call it digital dementia.
Wow. Digital dementia sounds infinitely more serious than brain rot.
It is a very serious concept. It was coined back in 2012 by a German neuroscientist named Manfred Spitzer. And the basic idea mirrors what we sometimes call the Google effect, or digital amnesia.
So the idea that we just forget things because Google knows them?
Essentially, yes. It's the theory of cognitive offloading. Because we rely so heavily on our devices to store information, things like phone numbers, historical dates, directions, recipes, our brains are actually losing the biological ability to do those things for themselves.
So it's the classic use it or lose it principle,
Yeah.
but applied to your entire cognitive hard drive.
Exactly. The brain is an efficiency machine. If it knows the phone is acting as an external hard drive and storing your partner's phone number for you, it simply won't waste the metabolic energy encoding it into your long-term memory.
Which makes sense, but also leaves you in a total panic when your battery dies. So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out if that terrifying concept is actually true.
Right.
We have a massive stack of research to go through today. We've got studies on GPS usage, brain scans of smartphone addicts, and some really surprising large-scale data on aging and tech use.
And we really want to sift through all these scary headlines to figure out the truth. Are we actually damaging our hardware and physically shrinking our brains, or is our brain just adapting to a new environment?
Is it damage or is it specialization? That is the ultimate question here. Well, let's start with the argument for damage, because I think we need to validate the fear first, specifically regarding navigation.
The GPS phenomenon.
Yes, because I have to confess, if my GPS app crashes while I'm driving in an unfamiliar city, I am effectively incapacitated. I don't know north from south.
You and millions of other people. And that is exactly where the research gets fascinating. We have a key study here by Damani and colleagues from 2020 that looks specifically at this exact issue.
So did they just put people in a car without a phone and watch them panic at an intersection?
Not exactly, though that would probably be incredible reality TV. No, they looked at people's lifetime experience with GPS, and the initial findings were pretty stark. They found that people with greater lifetime experience using GPS had significantly worse spatial memory when they were forced to navigate without it.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Yeah.
Is that just correlation? Like, maybe people who have a terrible sense of direction naturally use GPS more. Maybe they were just bad at it to begin with.
That is the exact first question any good scientist would ask. But the researchers accounted for that. This wasn't just a one-time snapshot. They did a longitudinal follow-up 3 years later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this is the smoking gun of the study. They found that the people who used GPS the most over those 3 years showed a steeper decline in what's called hippocampal-dependent spatial memory.
Hippocampal-dependent. So we're talking about the hippocampus here.
We are. The hippocampus is a seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain. It is your primary memory center, but crucially for this study, it is your internal GPS. It's where you build mental maps of the physical world. And the evidence suggests that if you outsource that mapping job to a satellite in space, the hippocampus literally shrinks from disuse.
Wait, shrinks is a really strong word. Are we talking about actual physical atrophy?
We are talking about a measurable reduction in volume.
That is genuinely terrifying. But hold on, I remember reading about the famous London taxi driver study. That's usually the go-to example for this kind of brain plasticity, right? Didn't their brains get bigger?
Yes, the classic McGuire study from the year 2000. It is legendary in neuroscience. So, to become a black cab driver in London, you have to pass a test called the knowledge.
Which is notoriously difficult. I've heard it takes years to pass.
It's brutal. You have to memorize 25,000 streets and every single landmark within a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross. It takes most people about 3 to 4 years of intense study.
Just memorizing a map?
Right. And when McGuire's team scanned the brains of these drivers, they found they had significantly larger posterior hippocampi compared to the average person.
Okay, so the taxi drivers bulk up their hippocampus because they use it constantly. And the rest of us are letting ours wither away because we have Google Maps.
Exactly.
But here is what I don't get. I use GPS every day. I'm looking at a map on the screen. I'm following a blue line. I'm making turns. Why doesn't that count as navigation? Why isn't that exercising my brain?
This is the nuance that really matters, and it's why the use it or lose it argument holds so much water here. The researchers distinguish between two very different types of navigation. The first is allocentric navigation.
Allocentric, break that down for us.
Think all over or other-centered. This is when you create a cognitive map in your head. Imagine a bird's eye view. You know that the library is north of the park and the coffee shop is west of the library.
You understand the spatial relationships.
Right. You understand how places relate to each other regardless of where you are currently standing.
Okay, so if I'm standing at the park, I can point to the library because I hold that map in my mind.
Exactly. That is a massive mental workout. Doing that lights up the hippocampus like a Christmas tree.
And the GPS method, what's that called?
That is egocentric navigation. It is self-centered. It's purely a stimulus-response loop. The voice says turn left in 500 feet, and you turn left.
You aren't mapping the world at all. You're just following a command relative to your own steering wheel.
It is robot mode. And biologically speaking, that doesn't use the hippocampus. It uses a totally different structure called the caudate nucleus.
The caudate nucleus. I haven't heard of that one before.
It's the part of the brain responsible for habit formation and repetitive behaviors. So when you drive with GPS, you aren't actually navigating, you are obeying. You are effectively engaging the exact same part of the brain you use to brush your teeth or ride a bike. It's automatic.
That is profoundly disturbing. So I'm walking around, engaging my habit brain, and just letting my memory brain turn to mush because I can't be bothered to look at a map before I leave the house.
Essentially, yes. By removing the cognitive load of figuring out where you are depriving the hippocampus of the exercise it needs to maintain its physical volume.
Okay, so our navigation center is taking a hit. But let's go deeper into the physical changes. Because looking at our sources, it's not just the hippocampus, right? We have studies here talking about gray matter volume in other parts of the brain, parts that control how we feel and interact with people.
We do. There was a very revealing study out of Heidelberg University, led by researchers including Wolf, that looked at smartphone addiction specifically. They put users with addiction-like behaviors into an MRI scanner to see what their gray matter actually looked like.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, gray matter is the good stuff, right? That's a processing power of the brain.
Roughly speaking, yes. It contains the cell bodies of the neurons. Losing gray matter is generally not something you want to do on purpose.
Right.
And what the Heidelberg team found was lower gray matter volume in two specific areas for these addicted users, the insula and the temporal cortex.
Okay, I know the cortex is the outer layer, but what does the insula actually do?
The insula is this fascinating, deeply tucked away part of the brain. It's crucial for interoception, which is sensing your own internal body signals, but it's also vital for empathy, self-awareness, and emotional regulation.
It helps you understand your feelings.
Your feelings and the feelings of others.
Wait, so shrinking the insula could theoretically affect a person's empathy and emotional control?
It could. If that area is compromised or less active, you might see issues with impulse control and a significantly reduced ability to understand how other people are feeling.
Well, that definitely explains the internet comment section.
It really might. It's a joke, but there is a serious grain of truth there. If we are constantly overstimulating our quick reward centers by scrolling, but underutilizing our deep empathy centers, we might be physically rewiring ourselves to be more impulsive and less understanding.
Okay, this deep dive is getting bleak. We have shrinking mental maps, shrinking empathy, and digital dementia. Is there any good news? Or should we just advise everyone to throw their phones in the river right now?
Don't throw the phone in the river yet, because we have to pivot. We have to look at the other side of the coin and ask, is this permanent brain damage? Or is it simply neuroplasticity?
Neuroplasticity being the brain's incredible ability to rewire itself based on experience.
Exactly. Our brains are not static statues. They are living clay. They change constantly based on what we do. And we have a study here by Gindrat and colleagues that offers a completely different perspective on this whole brain rot idea. They looked at the somatosensory cortex.
Which controls what, exactly?
Touch and movement. Specifically, they looked at the area of the cortex that controls the thumbs.
Let me guess. The thumbs are taking over the brain.
The thumbs are absolutely winning. They found that smartphone users have a significantly larger cortical representation for their thumbs compared to non-users.
So while my hippocampus might be shrinking because I'm not navigating, my thumb brain is getting huge.
Essentially, yes. The brain is dedicating more physical processing power to the fingers you're using constantly to scroll and tap. And what's truly wild is that they found these structural changes can happen in a matter of days. Days. The brain adapts incredibly fast.
So this brings up a massive philosophical question. Is brain rot really rot? Or are we just optimizing our hardware for the digital world we actually live in?
That is the core debate in neuroscience right now. Think about it. If you are a hunter-gatherer, you absolutely need a large hippocampus to find your way through the forest. If you get lost, you die.
Right.
But if you are a modern human living in a city, maybe you don't need to store that map in your head. Maybe you need to be really, really good at filtering rapid information, multitasking, and manipulating a touchscreen.
So we are just evolving into thumb-dominant creatures who use external hard drives for our memories.
In a way, yes. But we can't ignore the downsides of that evolution. The Google effect means we don't store information on our long-term memory because we know where to find it online. That can lead to genuine panic and anxiety when the device isn't there. We become entirely dependent on the tool.
It's a trade-off. We're trading our own internal cognitive capacity for external digital access.
Precisely. And that trade-off works beautifully until the battery dies or you lose a signal.
Okay, but here's where the story gets really complicated. I was reading through our stack of sources, ready to fully accept that screens are just universally bad for our brains.
Yes.
But then I hit this data from the UK Biobank and some studies published in Nature Human Behavior.
Yes.
And it seems like everything we just said about digital dementia might be wrong, depending entirely on how old you are.
This is the ultimate plot twist in the research, and this is what fascinates me most about this topic. We tend to have this blanket cultural narrative that screens are bad, period. But the data on older adults paints a completely inverted picture.
Right. So tell everyone about the UK Biobank findings. Because this wasn't a small study of 20 college students in a lab, was it?
No, this is massive, robust data. The UK Biobank follows 500,000 people, and researchers looked specifically at adults over the age of 50. They found that lengthy mobile phone use, specifically using a mobile phone for over 2 years, was associated with a reduced risk of dementia and Parkinson's disease.
Reduced. So for someone over 50, scrolling on a phone might actually physically protect their brain.
It appears so. And when they looked at the MRI scans of these older adults, the long-term tech users actually had thicker cortexes in certain areas, like the temporal sulcus, compared to non-users.
That is the complete opposite of what we hear about digital dementia in kids. How is that even possible? How can the exact same smartphone destroy a teenager's attention span but save a 70-year-old's memory?
It all comes down to context, displacement, and the baseline state of the brain. Think about what causes cognitive decline in older age. Exactly. Social isolation and a lack of novel stimulation. As people age, their physical world often shrinks. You retire, your kids move away, maybe mobility issues keep you stuck at home. The brain simply stops getting new, complex inputs.
And the phone opens that world back up.
Precisely. For an older adult, that device is a lifeline. It provides social connection with family through video calls. It's reading diverse news articles. It's playing interactive games that require mental effort.
It's a cognitive gym.
A cognitive gym, yes. It keeps the neural pathways firing because it provides complex cognitive inputs that their physical environment might no longer provide.
So it's basically supplementing the stimulation that their physical life stopped providing.
Correct. But now, flip that scenario for a teenager.
Right. For a teenager, the physical world is already full of inputs. They are in school. They are navigating intense social hierarchies in person. They are learning complex math.
Right. Their brains are in a highly vulnerable, critical period of development where they are pruning neural connections and learning how to sustain focus. For them, the phone isn't filling a void. It's displacing things they should be doing.
It's replacing face-to-face social skill building. It's replacing deep reading and physical exercise. It's just fracturing their attention.
Exactly. So for a developing adolescent brain, the phone is often an active distraction. But for an aging brain, it's a vital source of stimulation.
That is such a crucial distinction. We treat screen time like it's a toxin, like it's lead or mercury where any exposure is bad.
Yeah.
But it's actually much more like, well, it's like calories. If you are starving, calories will literally save your life.
But if you are already full, they make you sick.
Exactly. The device itself is completely neutral. The impact depends entirely on the biology and the life stage of the user.
That is a fantastic analogy, and that leads perfectly into our next segment because we really need to talk about screen time as a metric.
Oh, screen time. The ultimate parent trap. We stress about it constantly. We look at the little report on Sunday morning and panic. Get off your screen. But according to research from the Oxford Internet Institute, just looking at the clock might be the completely wrong way to measure the harm.
Yes, this is brilliant research led by Professor Przybylski and his team. They looked at data from over 120,000 adolescents, and their conclusion was pretty blunt. Screen time, as a raw number of minutes or hours, is a fundamentally useless metric.
Useless. How can it be totally useless? If a kid is staring at a phone for 6 hours a day, that has to be inherently bad, doesn't it?
Not necessarily. Statistically speaking, they found that the negative mental health effects of moderate screen use were described as negligible.
Negligible.
Or just statistical noise.
But how can that be? We just spent 10 minutes talking about gray matter shrinking and empathy loss in addicted users.
The key word there is addicted. The Oxford researchers argue that it's not about the minutes spent on the device. It goes back to your calorie analogy. It's about displacement. The question isn't how much time did you spend. The question is, what did you miss while you were doing it?
Okay, so if you spend 2 hours on your phone, but you still got your full 8 hours of sleep, you exercised, and you had a face-to-face dinner with your friends.
Then those 2 hours on the phone are likely completely harmless. But if those same 2 hours came directly out of your sleep schedule...
then you have a major problem.
Yeah.
But the problem isn't the glowing rectangle itself. The problem is the sleep deprivation.
Exactly. It's the opportunity cost of the screen time. And they also make a massive distinction between the types of digital use. We tend to view all screen time as equal, but biologically it really isn't.
Right. This brings us to the passive versus active debate.
Passive use is what we call doom scrolling. Mindlessly swiping up, just letting the algorithm feed you endless short-form content. That is incredibly low effort for the brain. It's pure consumption. But active use...
like playing a complex video game or editing a video.
Yes, or messaging friends to organize a real-world meetup. That is cognitively demanding. It requires planning and execution.
You mentioned gaming. I saw a note in the source stack that gaming gets a terrible rap, but it might actually have some cognitive benefits.
It definitely does. And look, we have to state clearly that video game addiction is a real clinical issue and it is serious. But barring actual addiction, studies show that action gaming can actually improve spatial awareness, contrast sensitivity in your vision, and reaction time.
Because you are actively solving puzzles and navigating complex three-dimensional environments under pressure.
Exactly. It all goes back to adaptation. The brain gets remarkably good at what you ask it to do. If you ask it to solve complex tactical problems in a multiplayer game, it wires itself for quick problem solving. If you ask it to just stare at 15-second clips of people dancing for 3 hours, it wires itself for very short attention spans.
So if we pull all this together, the final verdict seems to be that the phone isn't inherently rotting or shrinking our brains across the board. The phone is a tool, and our brains are rapidly reshaping themselves to be better at using that specific tool.
Yes, and the true danger lies entirely in what we stop doing. If we stop navigating the physical world, we lose spatial memory. If we stop memorizing facts, we lose retention capacity. But in exchange, we gain unprecedented speed and connectivity.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now? We aren't going to tell you to throw your phone in the river. That's just not realistic. And as we learned, if you're older, it might actually be a terrible idea for your cognitive health.
Right. Please do not throw your phone in the river. The goal of understanding this neuroscience isn't total digital abstinence. It's intentionality.
So based on all the research we've unpacked, what are some practical takeaways? How do we stop the negative rot while keeping the benefits of the tech?
Well, going back to the Damani GPS study, that is really low-hanging fruit for all of us. Try to engage in allocentric navigation just once in a while.
So actually look at the map before you start the car.
Yes. Look at the map, build that mental image of the route in your head, visualize the turns, and then try to drive it without the turn-by-turn voice commanding you. Or, if that's too hard, even just turn the voice off so you have to actively watch the map on the screen and orient yourself relative to the physical streets around you.
You have to force yourself to actually think about where you are in the real world.
Exactly. Give your hippocampus a little workout. Think of it this way. Hearing the word recalculating is just the sound of your brain getting stronger.
I love that. Recalculating is resistance training for the mind. What else can we do?
Regarding memory, don't be afraid to offload the small, tedious stuff. It's totally fine to let your phone remember a random appointment or a phone number, but make sure you are engaging in active thinking elsewhere in your day. Don't just let the algorithm wash over you constantly.
So find a way to stop the doom scroll.
Or, at the very least, interrupt it. If you catch yourself mindlessly scrolling, stop and ask yourself, am I actively learning something right now? Am I connecting with a human being? Or am I just zoning out to avoid being bored? If you're just zoning out, put the device down.
Use the phone, don't let the phone use you.
That is the perfect mantra. If you are actively engaged, you are likely stimulating your brain. If you are passively consuming, you might be letting it atrophy.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to go back to that thought we had earlier about the thumbs.
The thumb brain.
It's funny, but it's also kind of profound when you really sit with it. If our physical brains are changing right now, growing larger cortical areas for thumb movement, shrinking the areas used for spatial memory, maybe even altering how we process deep empathy. Where does this actually end?
That is the most provocative question to leave with. We are currently witnessing neuroplasticity on a species-wide scale. We are effectively merging our biology with our technology.
We're becoming cyborgs.
In a psychological and structural way, yes. We aren't implanting silicon chips into our skulls just yet, but we are absolutely offloading biological functions to silicon devices in our pockets. If you look at the trajectory of this research, we are seeing the very beginning of a rapid tech-driven evolution of the human species. If you project this out 100 years, does the human brain even look the same?
That is a wild thought to leave on. Do we just lose deep memory entirely because the cloud is fully integrated into our daily consciousness? Do our visual cortices permanently change to process screen information faster than the natural world?
We very well might. We are the bridge generation. We are the ones with one foot still in the analog world, where we actually remember what it was like to get lost on a road trip, and one foot firmly planted in the digital world.
Well, on that slightly existential, futuristic note, we really hope this deep dive helped you understand what is actually happening inside your own skull every time you unlock that screen.
It's not rot, it's change. And the good news is you have way more control over that change than you think.
Thanks for listening. See you in the next deep dive.